Like most of you, I'm sure, I planned on having an incredibly productive December reading-wise. I visualized a sort of cozy Christmas reading, kind of 8 hours a day, non-stop. And instead I ended up watching all 8 of the Harry Potter films over 2 days. And reading felt like an academic experience in a bad way. In this video, I just want to catch you up on what I have been up to. I'm going to give you a mini wrap up of what I've been reading recently. We're going to look at my 2023 reading stats, which I haven't actually seen before, but I've seen a cool thing going around on TikTok. And it's like a Spotify Wrapped, but for reading. I'm also gonna talk about the books that I got given for Christmas. By the way, because I almost never introduce myself in videos and I need to get better at it, my name is Chloe. This is Recovering Book Snob, the channel where we learn to love reading again. First up, let's just talk about some of the things I've been reading so far. December was a very slow month, and my current book, which I was hoping to really smash the final few pages before the end of the year, I have no momentum with it. I've been on page 50 for 4 days. Like, it's really going quite badly. For context, over the 3 months of autumn, I had a really long reading list, and I actually spoke about that TBR in a video, and I pretty much stuck to it, which is incredible. It included Anna Karenina, which is like a 1,000-page Russian novel, and I think that's a part of why I've had the opposite time in December. Like, I've been really slogging through books because my brain is just, you know, we have our ebbs and we have our flows, and I'm currently ebbing. So the books I read this December were quite random. The first one I read that I've been meaning to read for ages because I own it physically is Ariel by Sylvia Plath. I read The Bell Jar this year and I had never read any Plath before, and The Bell Jar I loved. I can so see why Plath is, well, a classic author, but also a bit of a cult. Like, the girls love Plath. She is a very raw writer. I think that's the main thing that struck me. And what's special about this poetry anthology is that it was actually published posthumously. So it was published after her death. She died by suicide, so a lot of the poems are incredibly depressing. A lot of it is quite shockingly honest. I know that's now become a bit of a cliche way to describe poems, but I was really expecting, with Plath being a classic author, I was really expecting quite difficult to understand poems. And although, as I said, that was the case for a few of them, I did generally find that I was just being repeatedly kind of smacked in the face by meaning, and you could really feel her feelings and understand her experiences. And especially for the time, it's just quite extraordinary to step inside the mind of someone who's quite sad, quite unwell, and has so many doubts and fears about her own life, but then in another way is so sure about her feelings and can write about them in such a confident way. It's just very interesting, and I really enjoyed finally getting to read this anthology. It's really reminded me why I always love poetry. I love how there are so many different interpretations of it. With a poetry anthology, sometimes the poems start to make sense on, you know, the 3rd read or the 4th read, or you leave it for a week and you return to it and the cogs turn and they click into place. But sometimes the poems also start to make sense just as you read other poems and you kind of understand it in the context of the other poems. So I just like all those layers and the background brain cog work. You know, if you're in the right zone, suddenly you unlock a poem and it just forces loads of emotion out of you, and it's just quite a magical experience. Anyway, I must stop my rambling. Next up, I read Shuggie, Bain by Douglas Stewart, which is a story about a young Glaswegian boy who is trying to help his mother overcome her alcohol addiction. This book is very sad, but it's very, very beautiful. And Douglas Stewart is a talented author, I will say. This was his debut novel. I actually read Young Mungo, his other more recent novel, first. That was my first book of his that I read, and I was very excited to read this. And I have to say, he has a very distinctive writing style, and the subject matter is also very similar. But the stories were kind of different enough for me to appreciate them separately and in different ways. I think in particular, for me, the characters in this book feel so real. I still now struggle to remind myself that they aren't real people. It was just really moving, but it is very sad. So you've got to be ready for that. The relentless sadness reminds me a little bit of A Little Life, but it feels more purposeful and a little bit more hopeful. So if you're looking for a kind of writing that is very raw and kind of real and maybe quite depressing, but is also a little bit hopeful, just a little bit more hopeful than the likes of A Little Life, then I highly recommend. Next up, and this is another library book, I'm getting really into my library books, I read The Girls by Emma Cline, which was a very viral, talked about book that I kind of planned on reading for a while, but only when I saw it in my local library did I think, yeah, I've got to take my chance, because who knows when this is appearing at my local library anytime soon again. The Girls is about quite a lonely 15-year-old girl growing up in California who gets into a cult. It's inspired by the Manson cult, and it sort of describes her summer first being intrigued by the girls, with her parents separating. She loses her kind of best and only friend. Her personal life breaks down and she gets quite lonely. She's quite resentful of her mother, and as part of a rebellion, but also as part of trying to find friends and find a home, she joins this cult, and in particular really looks up to the older one of the older girls in the cult. I do think I get the hype with this book. It's very atmospheric, and I think that the observations around loneliness and just the desperate need to fit in, and just like some of the feelings you have as a teenage girl and the kind of frustrations do come through, and it's a really cool book and it's a very easy read. I really flew through it, so that was really brilliant. I was a little bit sad about the characters. Like, the characters felt fairly limited, and a few of them, I just wanted to understand a little bit more their motivations and just who they were as people. But I think maybe this book just wasn't meant to be that type of book. It was mostly there for the atmosphere and for the thrill. But yeah, a very solid read. I think I rated it like a 3. Interestingly, I did actually read Emma Cline's book The Guest before. I listened to it as an audiobook. That was my first experience with Emma Cline, and I really didn't like that book. That was actually why, or a part of why, I wanted to read The Girls even more, because I disliked The Guest so much, and I just had to see how similar it would be to The Girls and how I'd feel about it because of how much I hated The Guest. I thought that the quality was so much better in The Girls, and that The Guest was, you could really recognize the tone, but it was just like a much worse version. But I don't know, I'm interested to hear if any of you have read both and what you think. Finally, we're on to the current book that I don't know why, but I'm really struggling to get into. That is The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennet. I read The Mothers by Brit Bennet. I had so much fun with The Mothers, I couldn't put it down. But The Vanishing Half, I am 70 something pages in now, and I'm not that interested. I do think I need to give it more time, and I also think getting into a book over the Christmas period is just a terrible idea. Like, my brain has been mush for the last 2 weeks. I cannot explain how little effort I want to put into anything. I've truly been just sleeping and watching films that I've seen before. Like, that is the level of brain juice that I've got in me. So, heavy warning that I'm not getting into this book, but I do think it might be my fault. I'm hoping to finish this in the next few days, just like zoom through it, because it's getting a bit silly now. I do think it's building up to something, and I can see the potential. But yeah, it's a slow one, and I don't know why. Okay, we're now done with my mini wrap up. If you want, you can actually, I put my Goodreads link in all my captions, so have a look at my Goodreads because I'm very up to date on there. I don't tend to write incredibly long reviews, but I will mini review at least every book that I read. Okay, let's have a look at the books I was given for Christmas before doing my stats. I received 3 books for Christmas, which I'm very pleased with because I live in a flat in London that I rent and I do not have space for physical books, hence my library use and hence my ebook use. It's kind of why I'm excited to get them as gifts, because when they're gifts, it's just different. When they're gifts, it doesn't matter what form they're in because they're a symbol of the love that that person who gifted them has for you, you know? That's my way of justifying the space they're gonna take up. So, Babel by R.F. Kuang, which I'm very, very excited for. I read Yellowface this year, and that is a great book. That's very good fun, and it's my first R.F. Kuang book, but Babel is apparently her OG success. It's also fantasy, I believe, which is not a genre I'm used to, and it's set in Oxford in 1863, and Oxford's relatively local to me, so there's an excitement there as well. Like, that's just a lot of fun reading about a place that you have been to. British Book Awards Fiction Book of the Year. Oxford, 1863, the city of dreaming spires. It is the centre of all knowledge and progress in the world, and at its heart is Babel, Oxford University's prestigious Royal Institute of Translation, the tower from which all the power of the empire flows. Orphaned in Canton and brought to England by a mysterious guardian, Robin Swift thought Babel a paradise until it becomes a prison. But can a student stand against an empire? Wow. The Times says it's for Philip Pullman fans. I haven't actually read any Philip Pullman, so maybe I should send this back. I don't think I'm going to read any more around it before reading it because I like going into these things pretty blind. Yeah, a fun one. A very, very fun one. Next up, we have Stephen King on Writing, which is Stephen King's book about writing books. It is a memoir, but apparently also contains very good writing advice. I don't have any specific plans to write a book, but it is one of my kind of secret dreams that I'm not really taking any steps towards, but that I would like to do. Funnily enough, I also haven't read any Stephen King. This is one of my 2024 kind of hopes, is to read some Stephen King, but I hear good things. I hear he's pretty good at writing. Everyone who reads this book seems pretty obsessed with it. And although, as I said, I don't have a specific plan to write, I am quite interested in writing in general, and I didn't do an English or like writing subject at university, so I just think there's a lot for me to learn, and this is a great place to start. Christmas book number 3 is Another Turn. I told you we have a range, and that is Either Or by Elif Bautman. This book is the sequel to The Idiot by Elif Bautman, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's about Selin. In The Idiot, she was at university and she was a bit of a mess, but not in like the chaotic, fun, gossiping with the girls mess, just in the kind of young person who's a bit pretentious and kind of wrapped up in their own thoughts, doesn't really know what they're doing, but also in another way offers quite fun kind of insight about the world. It's very hard to describe, but I know that The Idiot was a relatively controversial book because it was sort of waffly. Like, there were a lot of tangents that didn't necessarily go anywhere. The plot meandered around. Things that you hoped and thought would happen wouldn't necessarily happen. There wasn't this nice, clear kind of tension rising, tension release plot structure that we all know and love. When I read The Idiot, I didn't actually realise that Selin, our protagonist, existed in a sequel. I don't know why I haven't heard that much about this book. Hopefully it's not because it's awful or anything. I think it should be quite good, but yeah, very intrigued. I know this isn't relevant, but I don't really like the cover art. I don't know why. Anyway, it's gonna be great. It's the book for the lost gal in her 20s. which is my favourite genre at the moment. Okay, finally, let's take a look at my reading stats. I'll put some screenshots up if they're relevant, but my laptop's about to die, so I don't think I can screen record for you, unfortunately. I'm on myyearinbooks.com, which apparently was just created by a book lover and computer science major called Eric. Jack Edwards talked about this. I doubt you're hearing it from me first. Ooh. So I've just linked my Goodreads. I have to wait 45 seconds for it to generate. Wow, this is so fun. How interesting. I have read 63 books in 2023, almost 20,000 pages. That's so many. Honestly, I see some people who read 150 books in a year. That terrifies me. I'm very proud of myself for my 63. I read 36 contemporary novels. That's unsurprising, but it does make me think that I should read more that are across different parts of history. I can start with Babel. You contemplated the meaning of life through 26 lit-fic novels and 17 romance books. I'm actually quite surprised at that because I'm not really a romance reader. Interestingly, Margaret Atwood was my favourite author this year. Honestly, I think that's just because a lot of her books are available on the library. So I read both of the Handmaid's Tale books, so The Handmaid's Tale and The Testaments, and then I also read her essay collection, Old Babes in the Wood, sorry, story collection. And then I also read Elias Grace, which I did quite enjoy. I wouldn't say she was actually my favourite author of the year, but she's just very prolific and she's quite a reliable author. And then also The Handmaid's Tale I felt was maybe one of the best books I've ever read. So maybe she is one of my favourite authors. I don't know why I thought that. Okay, biggest reading month was August, 13 books. 5-star reads, it's listed. I'm definitely going to talk about these more extensively in a video hopefully coming out soon. But yeah, 5-star reads, Prima Facie, Anna Karenina, Sula, Americana, Handmaid's Tale. One word to describe your taste in books is adventurous. How fun. Oh, I've got a sneeze coming. Oh, I can download the PNG in different colourways. What shall I choose? Night, lavender haze, or sunset? It's actually really weird seeing book stats because it really, I forget what I've read. That's kind of why I got a Goodreads account, because I always just forget the things I've read. But B, my memory deceives me. Like, I feel that I have this impression of myself and my reading habits that is quite inaccurate to how I'm reading. I don't even know why that's the case, but oh, that's cute. Anyway, I hope you've had a lovely, relaxed December. I hope you have a great rest of year and New Year's Eve and New Year, and I hope you're refreshed and ready for the week ahead, for the year ahead, for the life ahead. Sorry. Thanks for watching. I hope to be a little bit more on it with my videos into the future, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.